So we just got a few minutes really, 30 to 35 short minutes really to look at this subject. We're coming at it from the point of view of how the brain works, and we're going to talk about workplaces for innovation. We're going to really talk about best practice in setting the workspace. But as I said, we've only got about 35 minutes just to sort of look at the big picture. So first of all, just a little bit about myself. So I'm Outcome One CEO and Principal Consultant. That's my own company. I'm also full-time with a company called Ray Castle, and we train telecoms and high-tech sectors. And I've been training over many years, both technical, but also a lot of sort of management type training, mini MBA type programs, really for the last 20 years with Gordon, who's also on the call today. I've been a member of the Institute of Leadership for 30 plus years. I've got to make sure I get that right. That title keeps changing, but at the moment, Institute of Leadership. Previously, I've been the founding MD of Informa Telecoms and Innovation Academies. Informa, a huge PLC, it's a FTSE 100 company based in London, but I've worked with companies like Google, Vodafone, HP, MTN, a big telecoms operator in Africa, for example. And previously, I was a Royal Navy helicopter pilot for a few years, which was great fun, but I never saw the family, so I came back into telecoms. Now, in terms of the source material from this, we've taken it largely from our leadership program, so the Science of Expert Leadership. We've actually got a course running next week on Tuesday that Gordon's going to facilitate, where we look at the brain from a leader's perspective, we look at culture and the work environment, we look at developing individuals and teams, and then the 8 C's of leadership, sort of if you like, a system for making sure that we've got everything in place for individuals and teams. But more on that later. I want to get straight into the presentation. So innovation, I know we are attending a webinar on from Ideas UK. So in theory, a lot of people on the call will know a little bit about innovation, but from the brain's perspective, there's probably 2 things we need to think about. So creativity in order to deliver value, whatever that value is, whether it's profit for the company, whether it's better ways of doing things, whether it's innovation in the value chain and the way in which we do things rather than actual products. It always involves 2 things. One is creativity, or if you like, ideation, coming up with the idea in the first place. And then the second part is the analysis or the evaluation of that creative ideas. And there's always those 2 things. And you probably, on previous webinars and probably some of the work that you do back in your company, looked at design thinking. You've got the double diamond structure to help us with that particular process. Ideate, so that good old term brainstorming. So ideate and then really focus down onto some sort of solution. So you've got that sort of double diamond approach in terms of the system, but essentially from a brain point of view, there's these 2 things going on. It's just simply ideation and then analysis of that particular idea. So that's going to be the basis of what we talk about. Why is it important? Well, you can see here the World Economic Forum, in the latest research, Future of Jobs Survey 2023, it is the latest one. They asked 803 companies of different sizes, but including some of the absolute giants, what their reskilling focus is in the next 4 years. And you can see that the top is analytical thinking and creative thinking. So if we just think back to that previous diagram, that's it, isn't it? That's creativity and analysis. They're the two really big things that we're looking for the future of work. So that's the focus for the next 4 years across all industries. So it really does fit this narrative of innovation. And in fact, if we go back to somebody that you probably all recognize, Einstein, he once said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So really understanding the actual problem itself. itself. To a lot of people, sat thinking for 55 minutes before you actually even put pen to paper on the solution is pretty alien, because we're all part of, most of us are part of big companies, and we've got certain KPIs to meet. We've got certain ways that we do things. But if we do want to really embrace innovation, we've got really three things to look at. So the first thing is that we need to have the right, so I just need to move something out from my screen. We really need to have the right sort of environment. We need the right tools to help us, and we need the right sort of mindset. And these things are all equally important. And the tools and skills we talked about, design thinking earlier, we've got a certain number of tools and a certain number of skills that we need to have in place, but also we need to think differently. Most really good creative companies that are building the most value at the moment, think of those hyperscalers, think of Google and Facebook. They've got a very different mindset compared to traditional style companies. But also we need the right sort of environment. And in this particular presentation, we're going to focus on the environment. But of course, you can't focus on the environment without thinking about the tools and the mindset in parallel. But we'll try and focus on the actual environment. Okay, so if we look at the brain and we look at a simple model for leaders, can we start making sense of this in terms of the way in which the brain actually works? So if we look at the brain as a simple model for leaders, we can probably think about the chemicals which are flowing around the brain. And what we normally do is we normally just focus on 5, 6 main chemicals, because we're not trying to be medically accurate here. We're just trying to come up with the model. And the model probably goes back to evolution, really. If you've got a hunter which is going after some prey, then we've got a chemical called dopamine, which is released in anticipation of catching the prey. So anything that we do in terms of the current way in which we operate, anything which is in anticipation of something is releasing dopamine. And we all know that dopamine can be highly addictive, because it's the anticipation of the next hit or next fix of anticipatory reward. So you've got dopamine. And actually, when that's released, that gives us some focus. It gives us, it makes us curious. And actually, when you're curious, modern humans, when you're curious, you're looking for that solving of the question that you're asking. So curiosity and creativity, they go hand in hand. Now, actually, going back to evolutionary history, serotonin kicks in once we've actually made the kill, and suddenly we get a real sort of overwhelming sense of well-being. We're good for a few days. We're good. We've got the resource. And actually, in humans, that serotonin still kicks in, but when we've achieved things. So, for example, there, when we're showing here in this graph, somebody's just graduated, that you get a real kick of serotonin when you achieve anything. It doesn't have to be that big a deal in your life. It's just whenever you achieve something significant. And again, that gives us the ability to be creative. And then finally, on the right hand side, just sticking with this hunt analogy, there is going to be the need to share that resource with everybody else. And that's where the oxytocin kicks in. And actually, modern humans, that gives us group problem solving. That helps us, when we are aligned with our peers in our teams and we're working together collaboratively. That works best when there's some oxytocin in place. It's trust. It's all about trust. And of course, the poor old prey on the left-hand side, we've got a few things happening over here as well. Endorphins kick in when we're trying to get away from the hunter. And, endorphins, for some people, that's the boss. For some people, that's the task that they're trying to achieve at the moment. The endorphins kick in with adrenaline, with cortisol. Now, endorphins are generally good. That gives us focus and, again, creativity. And the adrenaline In the right quantity is good as well, but too much of adrenaline, too much cortisol especially, that kills creativity. So we think about all of these different chemicals, and we've got to try and make sure that we get them in the right sort of balance. So as a leader, we can ask, how can I enable and even drive creativity and innovation? And the first thing is that we can try and make sure that we keep those chemicals in balance. And the problem is that as a leader, we're not just, we can only really impact the work side of the work-life balance. On the life side, there's lots going on in people's lives that we just have no control over whatsoever. But we can be aware of that. We can perhaps even compensate for that. And when somebody needs a little bit of extra time off, we can give them that extra time off. And that's all part of making sure that these chemicals are in balance. And it's really important for everybody who is doing any sort of work that those chemicals are in balance for that particular person, for that particular set of tasking. So we could think about circles of concern and circles of influence. If somebody spends all day on Twitter, you get a real sense of, the outside world is burning, right? It's that Twitter just being a way of looking at this from a personal perspective, but of course, same in the workplace. If somebody's really concerned with the entire company and how the company is operating, always having those conversations about, Division X is doing something that the workers don't like, you get this sense that all is not well. Whereas actually quite a lot of the time, if we concentrate on our own circle of influence, the things that we can impact, it's a much rosier picture. So as a leader, we can sort of play with that for sure. We can also think about how we communicate with people. We can think about those chemicals in terms of the way in which we get information across to the people who work for us and how we receive information from them. We can think about the emotional impact of things like presentations, written communication, videos, talking to people, etc. Now that's all well and good, but the whole reason that we're here today is to talk about the environment. So the actual workplace environment. So one really big starting point is probably this. So this in the next slide, absolutely key. So boosting creativity through neuroscience. If we're going to use creativity in the workplace, individuals need effectively high levels of dopamine and serotonin. So dopamine, stimulated. Remember, dopamine is released in anticipation of something. So it's stimulated, and serotonin, well, that's when we've got enough resources. Serotonin is when we're safe. So we need to be stimulated and safe, dopamine and serotonin. We also need low levels of cortisol, and we need the right sort of levels of adrenaline. Adrenaline can be good, but it depends on in what sort of mix we've got. So that's for creativity of individuals in general. But when we think about creativity in a group scenario, so group problem solving, we need that trust in the group. We need high levels of oxytocin. Have you ever been into a meeting where somebody dominates? Possibly the boss. Doesn't always have to be the boss, but somebody dominates, and you think, I can't possibly go against this person. Well, that's really not group problem solving. Your oxytocin is low, actually. In that scenario, you probably feel slightly under threat. You don't have the trust in the group. Whereas actually a really good problem-solving group will have lots of trust. Everybody will be operating at more or less the same sort of level, at least from the point of view of the creativity, and lots of oxytocin in there. So as a leader, we can build that trust. We can encourage collaboration. We can do that team building. That's really enabling us to put in place or to build that oxytocin over the longer term. As a leader, we can keep things fun. We can mix it up. We can look at new things. We can recognize people for their achievements. So that's really playing with the dopamine. We can focus on psychological safety. We can respond positively to failure. We can check in with our teams, and that's about the serotonin. And we can keep toxic people out. We can minimize bureaucracy. We can choose KPIs carefully, and that's really about the cortisol, keeping the stress levels low. I mean, obviously that list is not exhaustive in any way, but we're going to translate this in the next section of this presentation really into what it means in the actual, built environment that we operate in. The next slide is equally important. So this one looks at the chemicals. The next one really looks at states of cognitive ease and strain. And actually, the chemicals allow us to be in these different systems, as we call them. Now, these systems, at Outcome One, we use a model where we look at the reptilian brain, the limbic, and then the neocortex or the prefrontal cortex. So we sort of explore those in details. But here we've got a sort of shortcut, and this was proposed initially by Daniel Kahneman, who sadly just recently died, in one of his in his books, Thinking Fast and Slow, which you might have heard of. And he proposed that there's two brain systems. One is system one, the default network that we normally operate in, and then the second one is system two, the control network. But the default network is where we're most at ease. So it's our everyday life. We're optimized, we're efficient, it's simple. It uses shortcuts, past experiences. This is all about, it's all about trigger response, just going about our everyday business. But it's unfocused. We don't really have a lot of conscious focus when we're operating in system one, but it's more creative. And you'll see that. We're going to allow our mind to wander when we're in this state. We really are low energy. It's efficient. We do make more mistakes, but hey, if we really are interested in getting rid of those mistakes, then we throw things up to system two, to the control network. Now, this is less efficient. It really does tire us. It gives us more control. It's very focused. So we will be very focused when we're fully in this mode. But it's less creative. However, we do make fewer mistakes. Now, both of these are really useful to us as humans, but only one system is operative at a time in general. And for ideation and analysis, i.e. innovation, you need both networks. So this is where the ideation comes from. System one, I'm talking very generally here, but this is where the ideation comes from, and this is where we analyze it. And we throw these things backwards and forwards. But look at the attributes here. Unfocused compared to focused. Optimized, efficient, simple. Whereas less efficient, fatiguing. If you think about the times when you throw things up into your conscious thought, if you're ever distracted, if your boss is on your back, if you've got deadlines, you're going to be operating in system two. It's going to be fatiguing. Whereas actually what you really want for ideation is you want to be in system one. It needs to be easy. Your boss isn't on your back. You don't feel like you're being watched. You feel like you've got time to do things. So these two diagrams, the previous one on the chemicals in terms of how we can play with those chemicals, and then this one on in terms of system one and system two, really important. So what about the physical environment then? Using those principles, what about the physical environment? So we've got those two models, right? Left-hand side playing with the chemicals, right-hand side playing with system one and system two. So as a key enabler for innovation, the physical environment should, one, enable system one and system two. It should allow for defocusing, i.e. mind wandering, and focused analysis. We need to do both. They are opposites, but we need to do both. Secondly, it needs to keep people stimulated and safe with low stress. So we need things like novelty, fun colors, drinks provided, because at the end of the day, the easiest way to put people into stress is not feed them or give them things to drink, right? We should probably include nature and things like that. And then we also need to think about, it's not just the environment, is it? It's the tools and it's the mindset. So we need the spaces for individual and team ideation and capture. So it's no good having a creative space if you can't capture that information. Creativity without analysis is just creativity. So we need the systems to facilitate it as well. So at the end of the day, that first statement really is playing with this idea of system one and system two, and the bottom two really are playing with this idea of make sure we've got the right chemicals flowing. Okay, so we haven't seen any workspaces yet. We're getting there. The next thing to think about though is that focus thing. So we've highlighted this focus thing here. So defocusing for system one, focus for system two, but there's a really big thing in neuroscience which is starting to emerge, which is that mental focus really follows visual focus for most people. So if you want to think about whether or not your mind is focused, think about whether or not you're focused down on a perhaps a screen, or perhaps you're reading something. If you're reading something, your eyes are focused close in, within a couple of feet, then you're focused from a mind point of view. If you're riding your bike with those massive horizons sort of passing your eyes and the whole world changing, but you're not really focused on any one particular thing, you are unfocused. I used to have my best ideas on the bike constantly, consistently. If I went out for a lunchtime ride, that's when I'd have my best ideas. Of course, on the bike, how could I capture that? Well, I actually stopped, and more often than not, I would simply jot it down on an app on my phone, put the phone back in my pocket, and carry on again. But wide horizons, unfocused. And actually, for me on the bike, it was familiar, and I was safe, and I was at cognitive ease. Now, for somebody who's never been on a bike before, in traffic, you're not going to get that. They are not going to be creative. They are going to be focused on the traffic. But for me, it was familiar, safe, cognitive ease. My mind was wandering, and sometimes I primed it. And when you prime your mind, although we're not the subject of this presentation, but when you prime your mind, it's about thinking back to something that's actually happened previously, some sort of event, and then let your mind just take it from there. Or if you think about any one particular solution that you've been given a task to sort of solve, then again, just prime it before you let your mind do the rest. Things like light is important, and also distraction free. When I was on the bike, I was distraction free, apart from the odd car here and there, but distraction and deadline free. I couldn't do anything until I got back to the office. So effectively, whilst on the bike, deadline free, and all of that meant that it was all emotionally neutral, and I could operate in my default network. So that brings us to finally the workplace. If you look at these two diagrams, we could ask the question, these two pictures, we could ask the question, which of these two is best for system one? And also what's best for system two? So for system one, what do we think? Left-hand side, right-hand side? System one, remember, is cognitive ease, wide horizons, unfocused. Left, yeah, I'd go with that. And of course, system two, much more focused. There's not even a window that I can see in that on that room on the right-hand side. That's system two. So creativity on the left-hand side. So the opportunity for being unfocused. And on the right-hand side, focused analysis, opportunity to focus. And we've asked the question, are there any issues? Well, there are some issues, aren't there? There are some issues on the left-hand side. It says unfocused, but what about group creativity here? Would you be happy sitting in this area here on these desks where everybody else can see you? The boss walking past, I'd suggest you're going to be focusing on people walking past and people listening in, and some people who aren't comfortable, haven't used this space before, they're going to find that really difficult. But actually, in terms of individual creativity, it might work quite well. There are quite wide horizons. It doesn't have to be horizon as in outside. It's just, you just got to be able to let your eyes actually defocus. So there are some issues on the left-hand side for sure. And on the right-hand side, many issues there. Oh, sorry, on the left-hand side as well, no place much to capture ideas. There's a whiteboard there, which you might be able to use, but again, sitting there capturing ideas in the middle of everybody else is a little bit difficult. Right-hand side, not particularly inspiring, but it's very rare that analysis and creativity are completely separated, isn't it? It's not a particularly inspiring place on the right-hand side. So the title of this diagram, of this slide, is Optimizing for Systems 1 or System 2. So perhaps what we can do is say, okay, can we actually find a space which is optimized for System 1 and System 2? This is quite a nice space. This was taken from Steelcase Creativity Idea Book. To the when you get the slides, you've got the link there. But this is quite a nice space. You can see that quite nice wide horizons. You do get some defocus in there. There are some windows which helps. You get space for collaboration, different seating positions. You get everything you need in terms of power and things like that. So System 1, System 2, once you get to the analysis phase, sitting facing this board, perhaps bring a whiteboard in, that could work really well, actually. And this is a specialist company who design spaces for creativity, and that's quite nice. You can see over here you've got these pods. So if you can actually see around the other side, that's just a seating area where people can go over and focus. They can still get the energy from the group. They're still in the same space, but they can actually sit and focus. So that's a really versatile space, which is great for ideation and also potentially great for analysis. And notice how you've not got everybody else walking past. It's a safe space. I'm not sure whether there's walls on this side of it, but if there are, great. You don't have to worry about the boss walking past and how it's, whether or not he or she is concerned with whether you're working or not. Because remember, ideation is about letting your mind wander. It doesn't look like work. And some people get a little bit twitchy about that. So that's quite a nice workspace. How about this? So the title of this slide is Optimizing Systems 1 and 2, Discuss. So any thoughts on that? Does it bring in some of the elements that you need really for creativity in terms of ideation? But then 2, is it aligned to the actual analysis? Any thoughts on that? I'll just bring up the chat pod. If you guys want to use the chat pod, start using the chat pod a little bit. Any thoughts on that?
Seems to be more for just System 1.
I'd say it's more for System 1. Yeah, I mean, you'd struggle really. You could get a team in there, couldn't you? But at the end of the day, they're going to be quite conscious. It doesn't seem like it's a space where you can just take your stuff, camp out, and run a whole project there. I mean, you're half-hour max, just somewhere novel. Yeah, it can give you a bit of a boost for System 1. In terms of System 2, thinking about that whiteboard on the left-hand side, great, but it's in an open space. You're not going to be able to leave your ideas on there and come back to them and analyze them later on. It's got some merit, but some real limitations. How about how about this pod from Neurosonic? So Finnish company. It's called NAP, Neuron Activated Pod. Now, in theory, we could use that to rejuvenate. This is about, again, going back to those chemicals and thinking about keeping the cortisol perhaps in check. So you can see that at the bottom it says think serotonin, so well-being, think lower cortisol, and also think System 1 maybe while you're in there, mind wandering. Now this is quite interesting, isn't it? But some big questions. So are they of value? And we could ask a multiple choice question there, yes, no, or it depends, right? Because the second question, we've got, are companies ready for that pod? Some people look at these things and just think, absolutely no way will we ever see one of those in our company. That's just going way too far. But from what I've said so far, there could well be a need for people to just chill out for a while. But you need a lot of other things in place if they're to become part of company life, right? You need the right mindset, which is what we talked about from the onset, isn't it? That diagram with Einstein, we said we need the environment, the mindset, and we need the tools. So this could, we need mindset change sometimes if this is going to be of value. Because actually, the question, are these of value? It might be yes if you work in a company which is based on creativity. A lot of companies aren't, in which case the answer would be no. And of course, in a lot of places, it could be, yeah, it would be of value, but the negatives, because of the way the company is at the moment, means that it's going to be really difficult to implement this stuff. But there are alternatives. The reason why this is here is just to say, okay, well, there are alternatives to this. This is about, in terms of the workspace, just making sure that the well-being's in place, the serotonin's in place. And also, we're keeping that cortisol under check. It's all about work-life balance and getting enough rest and sleep and things like that. Just simple working from home and not harassing people between 12 and 2, for example, not as the boss, just leaving them to have a decent lunch. That could be an alternative. You've got to know your people. You've got to know what you're working on, how you normally work as a company. But that could be really, that could be really quite useful. So we can think about things like this, or probably for most people at the moment, alternatives to what this is trying to achieve. And then we can think about things like collisions, so design for collisions in inverted commas. So there you go. There's a quote: unplanned encounters and interactions between knowledge workers improve performance. And I think there's plenty of evidence to support that. Now, here we can think oxytocin. If you're going to be meeting people randomly in the lunch room or whatever, and you do it 2 or 3 times a week, you're going to get to know that person. You're going to be much more inclined to collaborate with them. So think oxytocin, system 1. Think mind wandering together if you get people who know each other. And, I've been training for such a long time, and at different times I've been in environments where trainers get together. And, once you do get to know the other trainers, you got some fantastic ideas for training. But also priming, you get an idea as to what other groups are working on, and that sparks ideas for your group, back in your primary team. So you get to know your peers. It's about collaboration. It's about things like converging pathways, where you design it so that people, converge and walk down the same corridors together. It might be that you've got fewer and larger break rooms, and give people time to use them, because it's, very often that is not wasted time. That's work time, even though the people are doing it in a very low energy way over lunch. It's about having a shared cafeteria, and it's about perhaps recreation spaces during and after work, so people can use those things during and after work. You very rarely see that. Now, this is
Tony, can I ask a quick question here?
Sure.
So in my last company, we did try to kind of create that kind of fun space. We put kind of a pool table in, a baby football table, that kind of thing. And it was a room next to the cafeteria, and it very, very, very rarely got used. I think because people were worried if they went in there, it looks like you're not working. And so they just didn't go in there. So there is that kind of, how do you help or encourage or enable, allow, whatever word you use, empower people to feel comfortable? I guess that comes back to that comfort piece, to use those kind of spaces.
Yeah, and it could be down to mindset.
Yes.
It could be that you allow people to go for a coffee instead, because they're not in the immediate glare of your bosses in the workspace. Or actually, the next slide sort of explains it quite well. This is from Facebook, but actually 2 weeks ago, I was in California delivering a course for a high-tech company, and they had a very similar sort of setup to this. So they had a some offices, and then they had a conference center just across from the offices, and in between they had a really nice mini campus, and they had lots of recreation spaces, and different teams, either at lunchtime or at the end of the day, they set up for happy hour, just a few beers after work, at 5 p.m. Or at lunchtime, they set up for an hour where people could just go and share stories and talk in the teams or whatever. So if it comes down to stopping work half an hour early once a week and putting on a happy hour where people actually congregate in these communal spaces, and maybe that's where you have your outdoor pool table, or maybe that's where you have your well, actually, when I was in the Navy, we used to play a game called Ludo very often, and that was always set up, but it's in a safe space. That's the key thing. It's the chemicals. It's got to be in a safe space. And if you're the boss, you go into that pool room and you show that people should be using it. Because if the bosses don't go in there, people really do feel like they're in the spotlight. Yeah, it's not easy though. It's this is massively to do with culture, which is absolutely ingrained in us. So you, as bosses, as leaders, you've got to work really hard to get around this.
Thanks.
Okay, so there you go. I mean, that's a really good example. That's Facebook, apparently. That's from Architecture Daily. Just a shot, really, of a potential. Well, it's an actual campus, isn't it? But as I said, this is really similar to something that I saw 2 weeks ago. That was, and it worked really well. In terms of people getting together, and I went for happy hour. I was a trainer, but I was there at happy hour, and of course, I had people coming up asking me questions about what we'd done during the day and developing those ideas. Just over that hour, we were developing those ideas even more. So we primed it with the training. Then we got into the shared space, a much safer space, because I'm thinking, well, why didn't you put your hand up during the day? Well, people don't like putting their hand up in training courses, because everybody else is watching them. Whereas if you get them into a safe space afterwards where they can talk to you in ones and twos, the chemicals are balanced, and suddenly you've got the collaboration space in place as well. So it can work really well. Right, just noticed time-wise, I've got to speed this up a little bit. But what about, we can also think about the physical environment in terms of assigned seating or flexible seating, and whether it's open plan or private. And you can really think about whether you're looking for focused individual work, small group creativity, whether you're looking for focused group work, or silo-free creativity and innovation where people truly do collaborate. And that should probably dictate your seating arrangements. And then we can think about distance as well. This is the Allen curve. So some work done in the 1970s showed that the probability of communicating at least once a week between different people massively reduces the further away they sit from each other. Now, this is really interesting because it seems to hold for newer communication methods like email as well. So the key takeaway from this is the more often we see someone, the more likely we are to phone or communicate with that person. So think group collaboration, think group creativity. So as a leader, obviously a lot of people are working from home, or we've got hybrid working. Can we replace that? Well, yeah, of course you can. You can have daily meetings, or you can have regular check-ins. So again, we need to think system 1, system 2 on that. We need to think about light as well, and without getting into this in any sort of detail, regular exposure to sunrise and sunset can help keep our circadian rhythm synchronized. Regular exposure to bright light early in the day, low light at night is good. In general, what we're saying is natural light, just to keep us naturally balanced, to keep those chemicals in balance, keep the cortisol down. That all helps over the long term. We can think about maximum organization size. So there's a company called Gore. So you probably know Gore-Tex from outdoor wear. They adhere to this Dunbar's number, which is that there is a maximum number which developed in evolutionary history for the size of a group, and the maximum number that we can interact with, remember names, all that sort of stuff is 150. And actually Gore, super successful company, always in the top 100 places to work in some of the surveys, that they adhere to that. They keep workplaces to 150, no more. And apparently organizational wise, that's optimal. And also you can think about maximum team size as well. And what we've done here is we've just plotted, the ability of a team of different sizes to communicate, to make decisions quickly, to think about the knowledge and the skills that more people will bring, and the diversity of thought and innovation. And it peaks around, we think it peaks around 5. I think some of the project management teams sort of suggest between 5 and 8. So it's around that number of people. And again, we can build the built environment really to reflect that as well. And then one last thought, really, not everyone is an entrepreneur or can innovate, although it can be learnt, as we know, but leaders need to focus on the environment, the culture, the tools, and the overall organization. Then the right individuals step up. I mean, that's, it's not for everybody, is it? Right. So, I went over a little bit there, I think. But
perfect, Tony.
yeah.
So thank you so much, Tony, for kind of sharing some insights, and as always, backed up by plenty of theory. Does anyone have any questions for Tony? We've just got time for 1 or 2 questions before we finish today. Any questions?
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you. I was just curious about the effects of sound on people as well, because you mentioned nature as well, and there's a few different things, but like, because I had a wonderful chat recently with this guy. He has a company called Mood Sonic, and creating basically soundscapes for companies, and it's nature, and it's constantly changing, and how that has such a great effect on both keeping us calm, and then also keeping us alert. But there was that, and also the issue in kind of shared spaces, because I thought it was really interesting what you said about collisions. And it was just a discussion I had recently with a friend all about headphones in shared spaces, and how it's a recent event, but there has been a change of it kind of stopping that really great stuff that we want, and the whole reason for working in a space together.
No, I agree. I mean, I've not done a huge amount of work on it in any way, but it's absolutely concur with what you're saying, Michael. Shared spaces, ideation when you're in a group is all about swapping ideas and building on other people's ideas. Well, if you're not even listening to them, if you're listening to I don't know, Foo Fighters or something, you're not going to get that idea exchange, are you? And you're certainly not going to be able to build on it. But the other thing is, it, depending on the type of music, can actually be quite distracting as well. So, what are you actually focusing on? Is it helping you focus, or is it helping your mind wander? Now, when I was really young, when I was revising for my university exams, I could listen to music and revise at the same time. There's absolutely no way I can do that now. Proper mind wandering, and I spent years never doing this unless I was on the bike. And I think it was the company that I was working for, and I think it was the environment that I was working in, and I think it was the KPIs and all the rest of it. Unless I was on my bike, I could not ideate. So, for me, now I can do it, and I can just sit in my office, and I can look out the window, and one of my sons, he wanders by and says, "Dad, you're not working again." And I'm thinking, I am working, if only you knew. But I am literally looking out the window, and there's no distraction. There's not much in the way of music, or if it's on, then I'm ignoring it. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Michael. But the other thing is, you can use some sort of natural sounds just to try and keep that cortisol level down. But again, it's got to be in the right place, hasn't it? So I don't think I've got anything concrete for you, Michael, but it's absolutely concur. That's all got to be factored in as well. I'd be interested to learn about the company actually that you're talking to, Michael.
Yeah, I'll share it in the chat.
Yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Great.
Thanks. Any final question before we finish for today? Okay, well, as we are at time, then I'll just say another massive thank you to Tony. You can see, as mentioned, he is running a course next week. So all the information is on the screen, and he is offering anyone who attended today a 20% discount to attend. So thanks again, Tony. Really appreciate everything as always, and you sharing the information with us. And we look forward to seeing you next time, Tuesday, 4th of June, again, 10 a.m. in the UK, 1 p.m. in the UAE, when we'll be talking about de-risking your innovation through university partnerships. So thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ina. And it'll be Gordon next week, by the way, on the course. But thanks, everybody.